there, and then welcome. Thank you for being here, and I'd say have at it.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Eric. And I just so you know, I agreed to speak before I knew about the spread in the back. Okay, had I known that Eric was going to feed us as well as I see back there, I would have definitely said yes even sooner. So
I brought the kids.
I did. I brought the kids. Yeah, it was a kind of a difficult scheduling juggle. I'm sure you all have those issues. I just had to pull my guys off the football field a little earlier tonight. So I'm just really, really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am Nena Cook, as Eric mentioned. I am a candidate for the open seat on the Oregon Supreme Court. And when I speak to groups like this, one of the things I like to do is, explain to folks why I'm running, what I think I would bring to the position, and then have an opportunity for y'all to ask whatever questions you might have about the race, the campaign, the position. The only thing that we can't talk about as judicial candidates is how we might rule on a particular issue. So if there's a question that kind of relates directly to an issue that may come before the Supreme Court, we both will probably have to defer, or at least I will defer on that so we don't come close to that line. So why am I running? That's the question I always get. The reason I'm running is because I believe I have the experience and skills necessary to contribute to a very strong Supreme Court. I bring something different to this position than we currently have on the court, and that's why I'm running, because I want to continue my public service and serve on your Supreme Court. So what is that background? What is that experience? I am in private practice. I've been a lawyer for 21 years now. And during that time, I've represented all kinds of people. I've represented individuals that were injured. I've represented workers. I've represented unions and their union members. So I've seen that side of cases. I've also represented small and medium-sized businesses. So I've got a business law background. I represent businesses in their contracts and their leases. I help them protect their intellectual property. If they get sued, I'm there to help them through that lawsuit. So those are the kind of experiences I have had as a lawyer. And most of my work is on the trial level. I'm a trial attorney. I'm the one in the trenches fighting for my clients. That's what trial attorneys do, and that's what I usually do, spend most of my time doing. I also, though, however, have a fairly robust appellate practice. Now, this Supreme Court is the highest appellate court in our state. So to have a candidate who actually has experience in appellate law is a great advantage. Just to give you an example, right now I currently have 2 cases pending in front of the Court of Appeals, which is the intermediate court. So that's my appellate background and part of what I've done professionally for the past 21 years. Even before I graduated from law school, though, 21 years ago, while I was still at Willamette, I was a certified law student for the Marion County District Attorney's Office. And I handled all kinds of cases. I tried misdemeanor cases. I assisted other district attorneys and assistant district attorneys with their felony cases. I made charging decisions, so when a police officer report came in with various charges that they have against a potential defendant, I was there in that process trying to figure out which charges should go forward. I argued against some motions to suppress. We did some serious work in the Marion County District Attorney's Office, and even though I was still a law student at that time, I was part of a team that helped do the work of the District Attorney's Office. So I actually have criminal law experience. Now, it's true, it was 20 years ago, before I was a lawyer, but that experience in the Marion County DA's office probably has a lot to do with why, of our 36 district attorneys statewide, 26 of them have endorsed me. 26 of the 36. I don't believe the other 10 have endorsed anyone in this race. Maybe one has, but the other 9 have not endorsed. So an overwhelming number of our district attorneys have endorsed me in this race, and not just district attorneys in terms of law enforcement, but I've got 6 sheriffs statewide who have endorsed me, including your sheriff, this county sheriff, and by the way, including your district attorney. So I always like coming to Washington County because I have the endorsement and support of so many people here. I've got your sheriff, I've got your DA, I've got 4 of your trial judges that sit in Washington County, elected by you, have endorsed me in this race. And then, of course, the one I'm also very proud of is your Commissioner, Dick Scouten, has also endorsed me. So that gives you a flavor for how Washington County has so warmly embraced me. In addition to my work as a lawyer, I am a pro tem judge. In 2007, this very Supreme Court that we are trying to ascend to appointed me as a pro tem judge in Multnomah County. So what a pro tem judge is and how it's different than a sitting judge is, I do it for free. It's a public service that I offer the citizens of Multnomah County. I hear cases, they're all civil cases, and when they come to me, I have the same responsibilities and the same authority as a regularly sitting judge. So if I grant a motion and the case is over, they don't get to talk to any other trial judge. They have to take that up to the Court of Appeals. So while it's part-time and it's a service that I do, public service, I still have the same responsibilities and duties as a sitting judge. And during those nearly 6 years now, I've heard hundreds of cases, heard hundreds of issues. I've decided cases if they're going to go forward or stop. I've decided parts of cases before they go on to another judge. I've actively participated in many, many cases during those 6 years. So that has given me valuable judicial experience. It's part of what I would bring to this position that I think is very helpful. So that's my judicial experience, my professional experience. The other hat I wear is I was in 2005 elected the president of the Oregon State Bar. And during that, this is a 13,000 member organization, all lawyers. You can imagine what kind of herding cats. Herding cats is a great way to describe it. But we did a lot of good work, and work that I'm very proud of. I have always been a strong advocate for assisting low-income Oregonians gain access to our judicial system. If our courthouse doors are closed and people can't get to the courtroom and can't get their matters heard, that's a problem. If people can't afford lawyers and they need one to help with a divorce or domestic violence, that's a huge problem. So all my career I have volunteered numerous hours helping people do that, but when I was president of the bar I had an opportunity to do even more. One of the things I did was work very closely with the then Chief Justice and the Chief of the Court of Appeals, and we went around the state and we also lobbied the legislature to explain why it was so important to make sure our courthouse doors stayed open, to explain why it was so important to make sure indigent defense was adequately, there was money for those needs. So I've spent a lot of time doing that. I've also been very active in an organization called the Campaign for Equal Justice. That is an organization that raises money to help make sure people get the access they need. And when people ask, you know, Nena, why are you so passionate about serving low-income Oregonians, and why have you dedicated so many hours to that need? There's a very personal reason why I have spent 21 years doing that. And that reason is I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was the youngest of 3 children. And we were already experiencing very difficult economic times. And then when my parents got divorced, really everything, the bottom fell out of our world in many ways economically. So I've experienced firsthand what it was like to have our house foreclosed on and the lights turned off and the car towed away. I know what that's like because not only have I helped serve people who are experiencing those issues, but I am one of those people. You know, certainly an experience I had when I was a young child, but that's not something that you forget. That's not something that goes away. It just becomes part of who you are. And that's why I decided that if I was ever able to be in a position to help other folks who were in that situation, I was going to do everything I could to make sure I could help them. And so that's what I've done. We did a lot of other work around helping people gain access to the courthouses when I was president. We issued a statewide disability task force so that we studied all the courthouses in the state to see what barriers to entry people had. If you're in a wheelchair, for example, and there's no elevator in the courthouse, you can't get to your courtroom, then you're not going to be able to have access to the same kind of justice other people are. Same thing with the hearing impairment or any other kind of issue, disability like that. We did a task force. We were able to study those issues and adopt some of those recommendations. So the last thing I'll mention before I hope we open it up for questions is, you know, it's a statewide office, and both of the candidates here are from Portland or live in Portland now. One of the things I've dedicated my campaign to is making sure we get out to all parts of Oregon. I have spent a lot of time in every county in our state. I have met with business leaders, religious leaders, lawyers, people in every county. And the reason I've done that is because, you know, our state is, we're so unified in who we are as Oregonians, but there's a lot of differences too. And I wanted to make sure that if I'm successful in my campaign, that I would carry those voices, those experiences with me on the Supreme Court. And one of the things people say is like, oh, Nena, that's kind of hard for you, right? Because you can't tell all these people what you think of a certain issue, so it kind of cuts down on the dialogue. Well, the real answer is, actually it enhances it, because that means I get an opportunity to listen. I listen to what people say, and believe me, people have said what they think about the Supreme Court, and I can tell you what they're telling me is they are so excited that we have an opportunity to elect a justice. You know, most Oregonians, frankly, don't know who these people are. Most people are appointed, they're unopposed. It's like, who are these people? And they're not guided by the R or the D, so it's very difficult for people to know. And so what I hear, and I think the reason I came out of the primary in such a strong first place position is because people know, as a lawyer in private practice, somebody who sat across the table from real people and businesses for 21 years, I understand how the law connects to real people. I understand that unless you have a clear rule of law, it's going to be very difficult for a business to navigate those waters. It's going to be very difficult for people to understand what it is that the Supreme Court has said if they're writing in such a way that's not understandable. And so to have that connection with real people is a tremendous asset on our Supreme Court. Most of those justices, again, it's a very strong court, but most of them have come through the public sector, spend most of their career in the public sector, and there are some justices that have practiced in the private sector for some time, but I would bring this 21 years of broad-based experience doing all kinds of work, my personal story, my professional credentials, both on a volunteer level, as a pro tem judge and a lawyer, and I'm working hard every day to be your next Supreme Court Justice. Questions? Yes?
I was just out of curiosity when you mentioned about traveling throughout the state and the imaginary divide between East and West.
True.
Who, as you met folks in the eastern and central part of the state, who impressed you the most?
Well, maybe the people that impressed me, maybe I should say impressed upon me the most is those folks on the eastern side of the mountains. They say, you guys in Portland, you don't get us. You don't understand. You live in a big city, you got everything you need, you know, it's tough out here. So just the mindset of just a different way of life for those folks that I talked to in Eastern Oregon. The other thing is the environmental and land use mindsets and issues are very different. In Portland, we have a very strong environmental community. On the eastern side of the mountains, you know, they feel like there's, in general, not everybody of course, too much regulation, not enough timber, not enough other uses for land. So it's really interesting for me as I'm listening, they're sharing their views, and I very much appreciate that. Yeah.
I got one.
Yes, Eric.
The Constitution of Oregon has some some things have been interpreted kind of interesting, in an interesting fashion. Free speech, for example, is one of the ones that seems to be very permissive. The case I can't cite by statute or by cases, basically there was a very horrific sexual portrayal of young teens in Medford, and the Supreme Court ruled that that was on stage in like a nightclub or something, and the Supreme Court ruled that that was permitted as free speech. And I'm kind of curious what problems you find with this free speech statute, or the free speech components of the Oregon Constitution.
Well, and before I answer, I'll have to just remind you that I'm pretty boxed in what I can say about those legal issues, because free speech will come up.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that, guaranteed. There will be a free speech case in the next session. So in general, let me just say, and you probably know this, Eric, you know, we have two constitutions, the federal constitution and the state constitution. The Oregon Constitution actually guarantees, it's a little more broadly interpreted. So the Oregon Constitution protects free speech and free expression, I think, more than the federal Constitution. And that's historically how the Supreme Court has, the Oregon Supreme Court has interpreted those issues in general. So Eric, I don't know if I can go much farther than that, other than you're right, the Oregon Constitution interprets free speech more broadly than the federal Constitution. But I appreciate that question, yeah.
How many justices are on the Oregon Supreme Court, and where is the Oregon Supreme Court physically located, or do you move around the state?
Yes, thank you for those questions. There are 7 justices on the Oregon Supreme Court. It sits mostly in Salem. But what I love is in the last 3 to 5 years, the court has been traveling around different parts of the state, especially sitting in places like high schools. Because again, we have this disconnect between here's the Supreme Court and those of us who are real people. And by traveling outside of Salem, going to high schools to educate those kids about the court, going out to our 4 corners of the state, that I think is tremendously valuable so people can see the work of the court. What is it that they do, and how do they do it? Now, they don't see the deliberations, but they certainly see the oral argument, and they see who these 7 people are. And one of the things, again, that I bring to this race is, you know, I just fundamentally believe, think about any decision of a group. When you have 7 people making a decision, in this case, the decision that impacts every Oregonian, I fundamentally believe that if each of those 7 people come from different backgrounds, different experiences, it's going to be a better decision. So we will have, come January, former trial judge, Judge Dave Brewer, who's going to be on the Supreme Court. He will bring with him his experience as a trial judge. Trial judges try serious criminal matters, murders, assaults. Trial judges are on the bench when the lawyers, who are the ones in the trenches, are trying their case. That's a trial judge's job. Judge Dave Brewer had that experience in Lane County. We were all fortunate as Oregonians to be able to have one of our 7 have that experience. I think that's really valuable. We have other justices up there who have been former Court of Appeals justices, but again, what I would bring is this different perspective of a lawyer in private practice.
Well, you mentioned that you travel around the state.
Yeah.
What's the purpose for the justices traveling around the state? Do you go gather information on cases, or go get background, or something like that?
Well, when I traveled around the state, I did it in my capacity as a bar leader, a leader of the Oregon State Bar.
Okay.
I did it in my capacity as a lawyer and just an Oregonian enjoying art. But the reason the justices do is so they can connect to different communities so that the public has a better understanding of their work.
But they're sitting as the Supreme Court.
Yes, yes, and they
Judging
hear,
cases.
that's right. So they go, say, to a high school, you know, every place is different, but they set up a bench and a table, and the justices come in, they're in their robes. It's a real case. It's not a made-up case. It's a case that's on their docket that has worked its way up through the various levels of courts, and instead of doing it in Salem, they're doing it in Tumalo, Burns, Benz.
Okay.
Ben, yeah, yeah. There's a question.
Are the arguments of the court televised, and if not, would you support that?
They are not. That's a controversy on the High Court too. You hear the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court, especially the Chief Justice Roberts, is very against having those proceedings televised. He kind of gave a nod to it with the Affordable Care Act. You notice they released the audio of those oral arguments, which was rare, and even rarer still was releasing the audio so quickly too. So the U.S. Supreme Court is not very interested in that. The Oregon Supreme Court, I haven't been part of those discussions, so I'm not sure why they have decided to do it the way they've done it. I know there is some concern, at least on the U.S. Supreme Court level. I have heard the Chief Justice say that if a camera is on, lawyers play to the camera. Lord. She's shocked. Yeah. So there, you know, and I think justices also could be concerned about their safety. I mean, obviously that's an issue, unfortunately, in this day and age. What I would be in support of is doing what we can as a court to connect with Oregonians. And one of the things I mentioned was going to various communities. I think that's great. I think to the extent judges, justices can be just real people. They have an intense workload, they have a very difficult job, but to the extent they can take time and go speak to a group, you know, go speak to a community group. One of the things I've loved about this campaign, you know, so the other question I get, gosh, do you like this campaign? Or I said, I'm the first to say, boy, it sure be easy to be appointed. That would be better, maybe. But I don't think so, because this campaign has really given me the opportunity to reach out and listen and talk to people, and it's been just a tremendously valuable experience. So I think if I'm elected as a justice, I will continue in that process in whatever way the chief asks me.
So is that a no? You wouldn't support televising?
Well, I just don't know enough about the internal discussions to be able to say, oh, I know better than you guys have been talking about.
Oh, no, I just mean.
Yeah.
What would your disposition be going into that discussion?
In general, always in favor of transparency. Yeah.
Thank you.
You had mentioned earlier about the task force that you had served with access issues related to courthouses throughout the state. Can you frame an answer that, with regard to incarceration rates, as far as would infrastructure changes at the courthouse level, and let's put it that way, as far as having more advocates, more programs available at the judicial level, what do you think that would do with regard to the incarceration rate, especially in light of what I read in the Oregonian, excuse me, a couple days ago about they're expecting another 2,000 prisoners and and they want to build 2 more prisons and open or open some mothballed ones. I think open 2 and build a new one. What do you think the effect of some of the results, the findings of that task force would address? How that would address that issue?
That task force didn't address the issue you're mentioning. But the issue you're mentioning in terms of incarceration and building prisons, you know, you've heard in Lane County they've had to release prisoners. You know, in county after county statewide, we're releasing prisoners because we don't have the funds to keep prisoners there. I think that's going to continue to be a very difficult struggle for the legislature in terms of allocating funds. One of the things, though, I think we should do just as a community, as a statewide community, we should do what we can to make sure, to the extent we can, avoid or keep people from getting into prison in the first place. I think that makes sense. There's a lot of folks that need mental health treatment, drug treatment. We could do more on, I'd like us to see do more on that front end to avoid the issues you're talking about.
Right, yeah, more on the executive level.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a question, kind of an odd one. Why does it take, like with death penalty appeals, like 20 years, or why does it take so many years to go through the court systems?
Yeah, those cases, as you can imagine, are the most serious cases that the Supreme Court hears. And there are a variety of procedural steps that they have to go through. And if there is a mistake along the way, sometimes it's got to go all the way back and start over. So that is the one example of cases that, I don't know if 20 years is, I haven't counted, but you're right. they take a long time to get through the system, and that's why there's a lot of steps along the way. And in any one of those steps, either side could allege an error, and it has to, yeah.
I'm the official timekeeper. We
Okay.
have about 5 minutes left of yours, but my question is, and I don't know if you want to answer it, you've kind of touched upon some of the issues already, but it was called to my attention the Willamette Week article, which I read while you were starting to speak. Are there any issues that you want to talk about that were brought up in the Willamette Week article?
Well, I think that's why we're gonna allow 5 minutes at the end, and I'm happy to address those
That's fine then.
those issues. But if I do have 5 more minutes left in this
Yes, you do.
segment, I'd love to take full advantage of that. And there's a couple questions too. Let me just quickly say, the thing that you'll notice about my campaign and candidacy, if you're looking at endorsements, you know, because again, it's a nonpartisan race, so you're not guided by the R or the D, you will see the endorsements of mine are just extraordinarily balanced. I've already talked about the 26 district attorneys around the state that I have. I've got many prominent criminal defense attorneys with me. If you want to talk about elected officials or formerly elected officials, I've got 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats. If you want to talk about county commissioners statewide, I've got 4 Democrats and 1 independent. So at every level, when you look at my endorsements, I've got both sides. That's the balance that I'm talking about. I've also got both sides in terms of organizations. I'm the candidate that's got the business endorsement. The Oregon Business Association, for the first time in its history, I am told, has endorsed in a Supreme Court race, and they've endorsed me. Yet at the same time, I've got the endorsement of some unions. So you look at that and you think, who among us, wouldn't we want a Supreme Court justice that's not predisposed one way, that's not is not open to the possibility of another way of looking at it, or beholden to one interest group or a certain group? I've got the plaintiff's attorneys with me and the defense attorneys with me. So I hope what I've demonstrated in my endorsements is this balance we're talking about. And just in the last 10 days or so, 3 newspapers have endorsed in our race, and I have been the one each of those 3 has endorsed. Very proud to have the endorsement of the Oregonian, the Statesman Journal, and the Daily Historian on the coast. So I think part of that reason is they view me as somebody who is fair, balanced, and has that diverse experience that we need to strengthen our court. There are a couple questions if I have
2
some
minutes
time.
left.
Yeah.
You know, I know Supreme Court justices get appointed. I didn't know that they could get elected. So what's the difference, and how does one
Sure.
become one or the other?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You're right. Most Supreme Court justices, most judges get appointed. We don't often have that opportunity to have an open seat. And it depends upon when the current judge or justice tells the governor that he or she is going to retire. So in the case of the Supreme Court, we have 2 open seats. Both of those justices have decided to finish out the term to which they are elected and retire at the end of it. They could have, one or both, could have contacted the governor's office and said, I want to retire early. And depending upon the timing of that communication to the governor's office, they could have easily just as been an appointment. And it is so rare to have an opportunity to have open seats for you all to elect your justices. There's a movement afoot. Mostly, well, it's not mostly, but part of the Oregon State Bar, led by former Chief Justice Muniz, to study this issue if that's a good idea to elect or appoint. And I believe the recommendation out of that commission is to move toward more of an appointment process. So I have no idea where that will ultimately go, but we do know we have an election now, and I'm happy to have that opportunity.
I think it's time to rotate, folks.
Okay.
How about some applause for Nena Cook? And Sushi will be served now.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate your interest in this Supreme Court race. It is a very important race. Our Supreme Court, of course, is the highest court in our state, and they have the last word on every area of state law that comes up to that court, and that they when they clarify the law, they get the capital murder cases directly from the trial courts. Every one of them goes directly up to the Supreme Court. And so they're dealing with some very, very significant issues. They make decisions every day that really affect our lives pretty profoundly in terms of liberty, property interests, having a remedy if you're injured. So it's really the kind of a race where the public has a very strong interest in making sure that they know which candidate has the strongest qualifications and experience for the position. You can't have too much experience or qualifications for this particular job. It's not a job that you want to award to someone that's going to be trying to do some on-the-job training. It's just not that kind of a position. So I have served the citizens of this state for over 11 years as a trial court judge, Multnomah County. Governor Kitzhaber appointed me, that would be John I. He appointed me in 2001. I ran for office in 2002 and was elected, and then I was re-elected in 2008. So I keep thinking over all these years as a trial court judge that I've seen it all until I roll out of bed and get to the courthouse and just can't believe what they have in store for me the next day. Over these years, I've presided over more than 350 trials. These have been murder trials, major felony trials, every major felony case that the state prosecutes. I'm also really proud of the fact that I started Multnomah County's first mental health court 3 years ago. We were talking about that just some moments ago. I've also presided over drug treatment courts. And it's really important to the citizens of this state that their public officials in the judicial department understand how important treatment is with respect to public safety. Because what we're doing with these treatment courts is that we're enhancing public safety. We're making people safer in the types of cases where what's really going on, what's really driving the criminal conduct has a whole lot to do with alcohol and drug addiction and mental illness. So these treatment courts just sort of call a timeout on in and out of the revolving door of in and out of jail, which we can't afford even if it was a good idea. We can't afford to do that. You know, it costs more to put somebody up in a Multnomah County jailhouse for one night than to put them up at the Marriott. And we can't afford it. And so I've done a lot of work on these treatment courts, very proud of it. We've seen some very, very good results. And if I'm elected, I'm going to ask the Chief Justice to allow me to testify before the legislature and really move this forward, because we can't afford not to move further into this treatment court approach. The public's ahead of us on this. The public gets this. And so we need to move along and really make this happen for the public. On the civil side, I've handled every type of civil case that comes into the courthouse, medical malpractice cases, wrongful death, nursing home cases where there's a death, very sad. Those are very sad cases, of course. But every type of civil case, some of these trials I've done have taken weeks. I've made hundreds, thousands of rulings sometimes in these cases in terms of just the number of rulings. So I'm not only a trial judge, I'm a veteran trial judge and a seasoned trial judge. And I ran because there's not currently on our Supreme Court a former trial court judge. Now, that's got to be a surprise to you, because what the Supreme Court does most of the time is look at the transcript of what happened in the case at the trial court level and come up with standards for the attorneys and the trial judges in terms of, you know, how we're going to, what standards are going to be imposed in evidence and instructions along a lot of different things like that. So in the past, there's always been a number of trial judges on the Supreme Court. So that's why I filed, because I knew based on my overall experience that I could bring a lot to the table in terms of continuing to serve the public as a Supreme Court Justice. So let me just step back for a minute and tell you a little bit about my life experience before I became a trial judge. I grew up in San Jose, California. I was one of 4 boys, so that made me one of the Baldwin brothers. But none of us were theatrical. My oldest brother played the saxophone. That was about it. My parents were from a working family themselves, and they were very engaged folks like you. At 8 o'clock on a Thursday night, coming out and getting yourself informed and being engaged citizens. That's how my parents taught me to go through life as an engaged citizen. And they didn't have a lot of money. They never had a real chance to go to college, but you know, they just indoctrinated me about education. A lot of you had the same experience where at the kitchen table you're always talking about education being the way that you move ahead in life. So my parents were so involved. My dad on the school board, dad's club president. My mother came to places like this often during the week and helped to get school bonds passed and set up parent-teacher organizations. And she volunteered so much they named a school after her, just based on her volunteer work. They didn't have any property to give for a school, but that left a bit of an impression on me, as you might imagine. So when I got out of high school, it wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done, because I was only 20 years old. I married my high school sweetheart, and we didn't have that many dimes to rub together, and we knew we were going to have to work hard. So what we did was we took turns putting each other through college. And back then it was actually a little easier to do. Down in California, I paid $50 a semester at San Jose City College to start. And so over time, we put each other through college and through graduate school. My wife became a special ed teacher in Portland, retired recently, and is very eager to help out with our first grandchild that's expected next month. Our daughter lives in the neighborhood. And I went to law school, and my idea, based on my parents, was public service. That's why I went to law school. So after I got out of law school, I got a terrific job clerking for Judge Robert Foley on the Court of Appeals. Learned right away how to analyze legal problems, how to draft legal opinions for Judge Foley. Then I went to work right after I passed the bar, after clerking, for Multnomah County Legal Aid Service. I represented low-income clients primarily in family law matters, landlord-tenant matters, and I really saw close up just how vulnerable folks are that are low-income and middle-income people when it comes to not having reasonable access to justice. And actually it had such an impact on me that I became director of litigation for that program for 5 or 6 years, supervising all the attorneys in the office, handling a lot of their complex legal work. I became the first director of the Oregon Law Center, which is a statewide legal aid services program. And then when I went into private practice, my practice was continuing to represent individuals and families. I represented injured workers and workers' compensation cases, injury cases. I continued to do a lot of family law cases and domestic violence, protecting women in domestic violence cases, getting restraining orders, working with shelter homes for battered women. I was a co-founder of Oregon Coalition Against Domestic Violence. A lot of opportunities as a lawyer to do public service like that, which I've gotten a lot of satisfaction out of. So my practice experience for 10 years was in private practice, representing individuals and families, which is a different kind of practice experience, particularly when you combine it with my legal services representing low-income clients. It's different from being a corporate lawyer or working for a corporate law firm. That's been Ms. Cook's experience as an attorney. That's a different background. That's a legitimate background as well. But in bringing balance and perspective to the court, I think the combination of my public law experience, my private law experience, which included a lot of trial work when I was a practicing attorney, and then this ton of experience that I have as a trial court judge. I was trained when I became a judge by experienced judges. You get training when you become a judge. I went to the advanced college, National Judicial College, 8 times in the last 11 years. I took advanced courses in settlement techniques, advanced evidence, search and seizure law. In these murder trials, you can count on the criminal defense lawyers putting, somebody asked about why does it take so long on these appeals. Well, there's a lot at stake in those big cases, you know, the capital murder case, their life is on the line. Doesn't mean that there can't be more efficiencies in how these cases are handled, but when it comes to liberty interests in our country, we kind of go all in. We just give, I guess, because of our passion for liberty and how much that's part of the American way of life. So in these murder trials and major felony cases, the criminal defense lawyers are really putting under a microscope all the police conduct in gathering the evidence, and I've written a lot of opinions in those kinds of cases. So I already have a lot of knowledge about how to write legal opinions, and I've written a lot of legal opinions. Over the years as well, I've mentioned that I've done a lot of other public service work with nonprofits. I served on the Fair Housing Council of Oregon for 8 years, and helped to start and worked with a lot of nonprofits. So last week, the bar had a preference poll. The Oregon State Bar sent out an electronic ballot to every lawyer in the state. And out of the lawyers that voted in response to that ballot, I was very flattered to receive 68% of the vote. And I think that's really based on 2 things. I think it's based on my reputation as a trial judge, a very long reputation as a very highly productive, fair and impartial trial judge. A lot of support from attorneys who've appeared in front of me on both sides of civil cases and both sides of criminal cases as well. And then this recognition that it's really important. The public may not immediately grasp just how important it is on our Supreme Court to have a highly experienced trial judge. Judge Brewer is coming on, but he was a trial judge 20 years ago. He and I coming on now would make a tremendous dent in this imbalance. We're out of balance in terms of not having enough trial judges on the court. But in the last 20 years, when Judge Brewer was on the Court of Appeals, during the years I've been 11 years I've been a trial judge, I'm following U.S. Supreme Court cases, Oregon Supreme Court cases all the time. I can't do all these trials without staying on top of all these issues as they come up. So I'm ready to hit the ground running as a highly experienced judge. If I'm elected, I'll have more courtroom experience than any sitting justice when you combine my practice experience and trial judge experience. So I've interviewed with appellate judges. There's 12 appellate judges who've endorsed in this race. It's difficult for a sitting justice or a sitting Court of Appeals judge to endorse because they're gonna, if they pick it wrong, they're gonna be working with the other person, and that might not work so well. So, even with that, I've been endorsed by Justice Durham. That's the justice whose seat is contested here. That's the seat that Ms. Cook and I have filed for, and he's endorsed me. Judges on the two judges on the Court of Appeals, sitting judges have endorsed me. And then when you add them with retired justices that I've met with and interviewed with, there's 12 appellate judges altogether who've endorsed in this race, and every single one of them have endorsed me. And so that's 100% poll. Over 50 circuit court judges from across the state have endorsed me. That's very unusual. This all combines, again, because this is important to the public, that this is not about Ms. Cook, it's not about me, it's about our Supreme Court being able to do the people's business in the best possible way based on qualifications and experience. So I have other endorsements that I'm very proud of. Governor Barbara Roberts. I think I mentioned I was appointed by Governor Kitzhaber. Governor Ted Kulongoski has endorsed me as well. Former Attorney General Hardy Myers, Sheriff Staten, I have endorsements from sheriffs as well, and endorsements from AFL, CIO, firefighters, state firefighters. I think this is a building here for firefighters. Oregon Education Association, when I interviewed with them and they found out that my mother had a school named after her, my wife's a special ed teacher, my two kids are teachers, I didn't have to say much else. I guess they did not know. This is a judge that understands education. So again, I'd really be honored to have your support, to have your vote. I think the people of this great state deserve a Supreme Court justice that can make a very substantial contribution to the work of the court, and I'm ready to do that. Thanks very much.
We have about 12 minutes.
The 7 justices, are they all men? Are they all white men?
There are two women on the Supreme Court. Yes.
I don't know who they are.
That's Justice Virginia Linder and Justice Martha Walters.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes.
Have you ever presented in front of the Supreme Court?
Yes. When I was in private practice, in my practice, I did a lot of trial work and handled my own appeals. I had appeals in the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. The case that comes to mind that I argued in the Supreme Court was the first reported case in Oregon where a young woman who was sexually harassed at work, sort of off the job, forced off the job as a result of sexual harassment. We were able to show that the facts were such that the employer really had an opportunity to stop it, didn't stop it, the harassment, and so there was a lot of economic loss and emotional harm to the young woman. A jury awarded punitive damages and other damages. Before this case, attorneys would only go to federal court and be able to get back wages under federal law. This court established a precedent allowing state court remedies to be available for damages in state court for sexual harassment. And after I obtained that verdict for the young woman, the Court of Appeals affirmed it, and then I argued that and went to the Supreme Court, Oregon Supreme Court, and they affirmed it as well. I've had, as a judge, I've had 2 cases of mine, 2 major rulings of mine go to the Oregon Supreme Court. and they've both been affirmed. I think we had a hand. Yes, sir.
In listening to both of you, I'm learning from the Supreme Court handles criminal cases, and you handle civil cases. In citizen participation organizations, we work a lot with land use issues and land use topics. If there was a case where a county, say Washington County, was having a case with a development company, is that something that would ultimately could get up to the Oregon Supreme Court after it went through some other courts?
Yes, that's one of those areas of law. There's some differences based on area of law, like there's a tax court, separate tax court.
I'm coming to that next.
Okay. But with land use issues, typically what would happen is the counties would be making the land use decisions, a county would. And then they're usually going to go from there to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA.
I know what that is.
Yeah, and then from LUBA, they're going to go over to the Court of Appeals.
That's the Oregon Court of Appeals.
Oregon Court of Appeals, which is an intermediate court where they have a right to appeal. And then whether it went from the Oregon Court of Appeals to the Oregon Supreme Court would depend on whether the Oregon Supreme Court, in exercising its discretion, would take that case because it presented some issues where they felt like the public would be served by clarifying the law.
So you're like the our U.S. Supreme Court, and you can decide what cases you want to take, and you don't have to take them if you don't feel they apply to you.
Roughly about half of the cases that the Supreme Court deals with come through the Court of Appeals. If it's a case that's where there's a decision by the Court of Appeals, one of the parties doesn't like that decision in the Court of Appeals, then there's what's called a petition for review. The Oregon Supreme Court can either, each justice will take a turn looking at a petition for review, studying it, making a recommendation to the other justices as to whether or not to take full review of that case or not. So about half of their cases are through this process where they decide, like the U.S. Supreme Court. It's up to them whether or not they're going to take it or not. Now, about the other half are like the capital murder cases, right from directly from trial courts, tax court, direct appeal, ballot titles. You see those in there quite a bit. There's some other issues that occasionally come up as direct review, where under certain kind of exceptional writs, writ of mandamus, they'll go directly to the Supreme Court and try to get the Supreme Court right at the beginning to answer a legal question. But so about half of their work is work that they decide they're going to take in their discretion, based on a case having just been decided in the Court of Appeals.
So the first step is our county
The land
circuit
use,
courts.
yes.
And then the next step would be the Court of Appeals, and
Yes.
then possibly to you. And, okay, now for a tax thing, if it's a federal tax thing, you don't get into that, that's federal taxes. But reflecting these economic times, for a corporate or a personal bankruptcy, is that a state thing or is that federal?
Bankruptcy's all federal.
Okay.
Yeah, the separate federal bankruptcy courts around the state.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
I just wonder where everything fits in.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy quilt. But so, yes, I think maybe back there. No. Yes, sir.
I wasn't aware that there was all these other different courts, but
Yeah.
any issue that involves the protection of the citizen of the state of Oregon, could that eventually come to the Supreme Court?
If it involves state law. The Oregon, if it involves an interpretation or application or enforcement of state law.
Okay,
Because they have the final word, they have the final word on state law, even as against the U.S. Supreme Court,
okay.
state law.
Well, I have two things that are concerned to me that haven't come up in either talk. One has to do with Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs and any veterans issues, and the other has to do with CASA. If CASA is all volunteer.
And
So
so what
if-
is CASA now?
A court-appointed
Special
special advocate.
Oh, in juvenile court mostly.
Well, if custody, for instance, were awarded to somebody that was potentially harmful,
Yeah.
the CASA representative, being a volunteer, would they then possibly have to go before the Supreme Court as a volunteer, or are there state level CASA representatives?
Well, volunteers, that's a great organization and group. People that volunteer to be CASAs really do some great work for all of us, I think. And they're always going to be in state court, I believe, because whether the juvenile court or whether it's in a circuit court, it's always going to be a state court. They're authorized by state law. And so cases that they would be involved in that went on appeal would, my understanding is that they would not be authorized to be involved beyond the juvenile court or circuit court level themselves. That if a case goes on appeal that involved earlier on, that would be handed off to an attorney, maybe a legal aid attorney that did an appeal or something like that, or public defender. Now, the Department of Veteran Affairs, that's completely federal. And
Okay.
so,
Okay, well, my question is that there's a possibility that a particular veteran might have not meet the requirements of a template for a situation, but the state representatives or ODVA might determine that they're a threat to themselves and to others. So there could be a conflict. On an issue like that, would that come before the Supreme Court, or would they just tell them to go elsewhere?
so the potential conflict on the state side is what?
It could be that the person in question would have be a threat to themselves or to others, but their particular conditions don't meet the template that the federal government sets out for dangerous
For disability?
Disabilities, yes.
Okay. Well, the state process that you're describing, I think, would be a civil commitment type of a process, so state law would determine that. The Court of Appeals does give many, many appeals of civil commitments. I've presided over many, many civil commitment hearings myself, and some of those cases could go on to the Supreme Court. So, to the extent that it's a civil commitment proceeding, it's a state law matter, and state court would have an exclusive jurisdiction over that.
2 minutes left on your.
Okay. Yes, sir.
You're from the South Bay. Sharks fan?
My brother's a shark. You know, the Sharks came on the scene. I moved up here with my wife Teresa in 1972, and I think the Sharks took over the minds of the populace down there.
Early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah.
But I'm a sports nut.